Hello everyone and welcome to this new video tutorial. Today what we'll be talking about is UV Unwrap. What is UV Unwrap? When you do 3D and you create an object and after that you want to texture it and paint it, you will have to unwrap it. Unwrapping the object means taking that object and flattening all the surfaces to be able to export it to a texture software or painting software. Now, it might be a complex process, not because it requires to use various tools, but because you will have to understand how to break down that object. The reason for that is that you'll be working with two things to keep in mind. The first one is how to open it, how to make it look good to paint, and on top of that, try to do it with a minimum amount of seams. Now, if we look at unwrap in real life, if I take this box here, this is a container, and if I wanted to paint it from every side and not have any seams here, I will have to unwrap it. So unwrapping is the fact of doing simply this to my object and opening all the surfaces to turn it into a flat surface and paint it all. And this is how it's done in a print shop. In a print shop it will be printed this way, it's not printed closed. So the way we can do is the exact same thing in 3D. What do I mean by that? Let's move on to Maya. Alright, so now being in Maya, let's go and open our UV editor. The UV editor, you will find it here on top. You hit UV and click on UV editor. Now the UV editor is a window that is in 2D. This is a flat area, and each square here is considered an island, which means this is where your textures will be held to be able to export it and after that paint it into a 3D software. Now for certain since certain texture softwares around in the industry such as Mari or ZBrush, Mudbox, well, I would say Substance, we are not anymore limited to just one island, but we can work on 2, 3, etc. But if you're working for Photoshop and to export, Photoshop and texture, you'll have to work in only one of them. Now, what is unwrap? If I go create myself a simple object, now I created my cube here, and you see that this cube is automatically unwrapped, and it fits to what we said previously. The reason for that is to be able to export that to a 3D software, and after that, modify it and adjust it to our needs. Now that I have this, we'll go, as I said, very simple. My unwraps have been created automatically because it's a cube. But for everything else, you will have to do it manually, and this is what we will be looking at in the next video when we will be unwrapping our headphones. But right now, as I said, I will go very quick to make you understand how unwrap works. So I will take my map here, and I'll go to Image and create UV Snapshot. Now that I created a UV Snapshot, you have to remember where your file is saved. I will drop mine on my desktop for simplicity, and I will name it cube unwrap, and my cube unwrap here. Let's hit save. My size will be 2048 by 2048. I'd like to work with a large map, and I will decide to send it there as a PNG. I will lock my aspect ratio and don't touch anything else. I will hit apply and close. Now if I go back to my desktop, I should have my new file that is here. This is my cube unwrap, right? Let's go and try and do something else first. I will surrender as well a JPEG image. So I keep the same size. This one is a PNG. I can keep the same name because I'm changing format. Apply and close. Now let me open my Photoshop. So give me a second. And what we're going to do in Photoshop, we will paint this and write, let's say, numbers in every one of those squares. And then we'll put a color that will overlap over the edge. Right, I talked previously about seams. The seams are these areas here. This is where my cube is cut. So if I go here on edge mode and I select this, you will see in my viewport that I have this edge selected only. But this edge in my UV Unwrap is right here as well as here. Why? Because this is where everything will be stitched together in our cube. So now that my Photoshop is open, let me go create a new. I'll do it something pretty simple here. Let's hit create, and I will drag and drop my map to Photoshop, and I will use this one would give me an opacity. Let me hide my extras. I will take the one that is in the JPEG mode. There you go. And now here I have the UVs I created previously that are available now for me in Photoshop. So if I go to my layers, and if you don't have yet an understanding of Photoshop, I will be recording another video which is a quick introduction to Photoshop. But right now, I assume that here you already even have certain basics here. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I'll go quickly here and rasterize my layer. So now it became an image. And if you see here, everything that I have is exactly the same information that I had into my UV Unwrap. So let's create myself a new layer on top, and on this layer with my brush I will write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I will change color. Let's put something more red here, and I will paint whatever horrible shape with my mouse. I'm not using my tablet right now, but when I'm going to get to textures, I'll be using my Wacom tablet. So I've painted these shapes here and there. Let me go get another color, and for this one I'll just create lines here as well as here, and you will understand how the seams will work. Let's go here, and there you go. Now I'll go to File, Save As, right here. I will drop that on my desktop as well, just for speed purpose, but don't do that because you will end up with a disorganized desktop. May I delete my files right after, and I will name it here. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me hide the black background. So we just keep that. Now we don't have the lines. We don't want to see the lines of our unwrap on our texture. So I keep it like that, and I will go with File, Save As. I will save simply. I'll go with the JPEG or PNG, something that is quick basically, and I will name it Cube Texture TST for test, and let's hit save. I want to keep a large file. So now, since I went to Photoshop, I can go back to my Maya here. Let's go back to object mode. Turn off my wireframe, so I want it to be shaded with wireframe. And we'll go to my hypershade. I will discuss about the hypershade in a different video that you will find very soon at the bottom of this playlist. I'll go create myself. This is the hypershade. Basically, this is the area where we're working with textures in Maya. And we'll go with the default shader, which is a Lambert here. Click on this, and I'll explain to you all of that in my next video, because I wanted to talk about Unwrap, not how to deal with Photoshop or how to deal with the hypershade. We're gonna get to that. I want you right now just to understand Unwrap. So I will go to my color, and in my color, hit that little checker, go get myself a file, and in my file, I'll go to my desktop, and it was that's my Cube Unwrap. Did I export my texture properly? Let me just go back here, Cube Unwrap, and I think I didn't save it in the right place. So let's go back to Photoshop and let's do it again. Let's go to File, Save As. I will create myself a JPEG here and drop it on my desktop, and I will name it Cube Texture. Let's hit save. Let's keep it here. Let's go back to Maya, my hypershade. Now let's look for our file on the desktop, which is here, my cube texture.jpg. Press open, select my object, right click on the Lambert, assign material to viewport, and let's take a look at our object now with the textures on it. So here I did my first unwrap and created my first Photoshop texture. Now you see that the areas where I don't have seams, the line that I created previously here, when I said, look at this line here, this line is in an area where I don't have seams. So what's going to happen is that it will work properly. It will go from one to the other. But now the challenge with the seams is what I tested here for this edge, which is the cut with this one. So now as long as those ones are not perfectly aligned, so there is a seam, you'll see that they're not going to get connected properly the same way as here. Now look at the opposite way. So the trick about that is to always think about how are you going to deal with the various seams around your object, because they will be visible and you don't want that. Now that we're done with this introduction to UV Unwrap, we'll get back to our project with the headphones that we will unwrap. There is 2 other videos that I'll be building here very quickly for you to be able to follow, and it will be an introduction to Photoshop and an introduction to the Hypershade and Maya 2020. Thank you very much for following. Please subscribe and let's watch the next video. Thank you.